in a remote stretch along Canada's northern edge at the end of a waning summer. When the light of the low sun glinted off endless sheets of ice and the salty tang of the ocean intermingled with the crisp air, a rare congregation of polar bears gathered in solemn unity. Their assembly, 4 or 5 mighty figures drawn together by an unforeseen bounty, a beached whale or temporary food cache, became nature's feast and nature's forum. Despite their inherent competitiveness, these great white predators, on this day of abundant harvest, shared their bounty with a quiet camaraderie born of necessity and mutual respect. Yet deep in the shadowed fringe of an ancient, coniferous stand bordering the icy expanse, an unspeakable hunger stirred, hidden for generations in the depths of the forest. The Wendigo, a spectral, cursed spirit known by indigenous legends for borrowing the life force of fallen predators, had long lurked in the dark recesses of the wild. The creature's eternal hunger, said to be unquenchable, had driven it to seek the scent of fresh meat, and on this day, the scent of the gathered polar bears and their shared meal proved irresistible. With a silent, malevolent purpose, the Wendigo slipped from its shadowy refuge, drawn inexorably toward the banquet of life that now lay open under the late summer sky. As the radiant day wore on, an uneasy tension fell upon the congregation. Normally, polar bears, although fierce competitors, maintained a fragile neutrality when the feast was plentiful. Yet the Wendigo's approach altered the dynamic. Its presence was heralded only by an almost imperceptible chill and a faint, discordant whisper on the wind. Moments later, in the midst of a communal meal, the creature struck with ruthless cunning, targeting a single cub that had for a brief, solitary moment strayed too far from the safety of its elders. The Wendigo pounced, its elongated claws aimed to seize and devour with supernatural swiftness. The terrified cry of the cub shattered the brief camaraderie. In an instant, the mood transformed from tentative peace to violent alarm. A colossal mother, her instincts ignited by maternal fury, bounded from the circle, her powerful limbs propelling her forward as she raced to rescue the vulnerable child. In the chaos that ensued, the Wendigo, sleek, fast, and imbued with an eerie, unnatural agility, dismissed its solitary predation and began its relentless assault upon the feast. Its movements were a grotesque blend of sinuous stalking and sudden, savage bursts, as it aimed to disrupt not only an isolated victim but the harmony of the entire group. Then, as if compelled by a force older than rivalry itself, something remarkable happened. The adult bears, long known for their solitary nature, set aside inherent competition to stand together against a common, existential threat. In a coordinated burst of unexpected unity, 2 or 3 of the largest polar bears converged upon the Wendigo. Their roars, deep, resonant declarations of ferocity, echoed across the ice as they formed an impromptu circle. Flanking the monstrous intruder, the Wendigo, though swift and armed with razor-sharp claws, found itself overwhelmed by the sheer physical might of these great predators. The atmosphere shifted into a maelstrom of raw power as jaws snapped, paws swiped, and primal growls filled the heavy air. The battle reached a fevered pitch as the Wendigo attempted to exploit any moment of isolation from the pack, lunging with a speed that blurred its form. At one point, the creature broke free from a secondary flanking bear and reared on its hind legs in a bizarre mimicry of a polar bear's posture, only to be met by a coordinated counterattack, one polar bear slamming its massive head against the creature while another sank its teeth into its limb. The Wendigo's body, a hideous amalgam of its spectral essence and the stolen might of the polar bear, thrashed in bloody defiance. Each brutal impact sent shockwaves through the surrounding ice, fracturing the pristine surface into jagged patterns that reflected the violent struggle. For long moments, the clash of titanic forces played out under the watchful glare of the low summer sun. Amid cries of aggression and the sound of splintering ice, the Wendigo's ferocity was gradually diminished by the relentless assault of united polar power. Its attempts to retreat were thwarted by the bear's coordinated pursuit, each time the creature tried to slip away into a narrow crevasse or a patch of shadow. The onrush of determined bears drove it back out into the open. The Wendigo's eye, burning with a maddening, unholy light, conveyed an ancient, insatiable hunger that refused to be quenched even as its physical form began to show signs of grievous injury. The climax of the struggle came with an almost mythic ferocity, as the Wendigo fought to break free from an inescapable pincer attack. Its body was battered by relentless bites and crushing blows from paws honed by millennia of survival in the frozen wastes. The combined might of the polar bears proved overwhelming, with a final, earth-shaking roar that merged sorrow with wrath. One of the enormous bears delivered a devastating strike that sent the Wendigo reeling backward. In that heart-stopping moment, the creature's stolen power fractured, and it staggered, bleeding and convulsing, before letting out one last, despairing howl. Unable to withstand the coordinated might of the united bear pack, the monstrous hybrid made a desperate bid for survival. It turned and fled, its retreat marked by the echoing rumbles of fractured ice and the cacophony of victorious roars. Its final cries were as much a promise of eventual return as they were a dirge of defeat, an ambiguous portent that, though beaten back for now, the dark curse might one day reawaken when the balance of nature once again faltered under the weight of human ambition and greed. In the aftermath of the deadly clash, the bears, their wounds deep and their pride humbled, slowly returned to their feast. The polar cub, though scarred by the violence of the encounter, nestled close to its protective mother. In the lingering light of the day, as the ice gradually reformed its silent, everlasting patterns, the surviving bears resumed their feast of the beached whale, a grim, yet strangely symbolic, reminder that nature, even in its brutal carnage, ultimately finds a way to restore balance through the relentless cycles of life and death. Yet even as the gathering dispersed into the vast, unyielding wilderness, a somber question lingered on the wind: would the Wendigo, defeated but not utterly destroyed, lie dormant in the shadowed hollows of the forest to return on a darker night? Among the indigenous people who witnessed the carnage and interpreted its ancient omens, this unspoken doubt became a dire caution, that as long as greed and cruelty festered in the human heart, ancient curses could never be laid to rest. Thus, beneath a sky ablaze with the waning light of a summer's end, a sky that bore silent witness to the eternal struggle between predation and unity, between ancient evil and nature's indomitable will, the saga of the polar bear pack and the vengeful Wendigo reached its uncertain climax. The bears, unified in an act of rare solidarity, had reclaimed their sacred right to feast and protect their young. But in the subtle, shifting glances and lingering roars that echoed across the ice, the legacy of that terrible day served as a chilling reminder: nature's balance, however delicate, depends on the collective strength to resist the darkness. And until that strength endures, the curse may one day rise again. Along the endless, crystalline plain on the northern edge of Canada, the rare congregation of polar bears feasted beneath a sky of brilliant, unyielding light. It was late summer, a time when even the harsh Arctic had moments of abundance, when the scent of a beached whale or the rare bounty of seasonal prey could summon bears from distant territories. The majesty of these great white sentinels, gathering in a temporary yet harmonious assembly, was a sight to behold. Once fierce competitors, they now coexisted in a delicate truce born from the promise of plentiful nourishment. Yet even amidst the calm and shared indulgence, an unsettling chill crept into the warmth of daylight. Hidden deep within the towering pines at the forest's edge, a realm where shadows and secrets intertwined, a dark presence stirred. The Wendigo, a creature whispered about in ancient indigenous lore, had long slumbered in the remote recesses of the wild. It was said that this cursed spirit could absorb the energy of its fallen prey, growing stronger with each life it claimed. Drawn by the irresistible scent of meat and life, the Wendigo began its stealthy approach into the field of gathered polar bears. At first, the intruder's subtle movements were hardly noticed. A flicker of unnatural motion at the periphery of the feast, an almost imperceptible drop in the ambient temperature as the cursed spirit drew near. Then, in a moment that shattered the fragile peace of the assembly, one of the youngest and smallest cubs, having strayed momentarily from the protective circle, became the target. In a burst of predatory speed, the Wendigo pounced from the dark undergrowth. Its elongated claws, glinting with an otherworldly sharpness, sliced the air before finding purchase on the cub. The startled cry of the cub rang out, a raw, desperate sound that echoed across the ice and sent immediate shockwaves through the gathered predators. Instantly, Chaos erupted. The cub's terrified cry galvanized the adults, a mother bear, whose protective instincts were as ancient as the ice itself, surged forward with a powerful bound. Her massive form, honed by years of surviving the unforgiving north, moved with a grace and fury that belied her size. As she reached the fallen cub, her deep, resounding roar cut sharply through the cold air, a primal call that summoned the latent courage in every bear present. In that defining moment, what had once been an opportunistic gathering for sustenance transformed into a battleground. The Wendigo, driven by its insatiable hunger and the power it sought to absorb, shifted its focus. It darted through the melee with an unsettling fluidity, its movements marked by the bizarre blend of a spectral predator and the raw, powerful instincts of a great carnivore. Its presence was at once horrifying and strangely mesmerizing, a dark silhouette amid the radiance of the polar feast. As the creature targeted one isolated bear after another, snatching swiftly at the weak or solitary, and releasing guttural cries with each lunge, the primal chorus of polar bears erupted into a unified, savage symphony. In an almost unprecedented display of interdependence, 2, then 3 massive bears, usually solitary in their hunts, converged on the Wendigo. Their coordination, born not of conscious strategy but of an innate, resonant need to protect their kin and preserve the bounty of the feast, was a sight that seemed to defy the natural order. Their roars blended into a cacophonous defiance, echoing across the endless expanse of ice as they closed in with relentless determination. The Wendigo, though wreathed in spectral malice and possessed of fearsome agility, found itself outnumbered and overwhelmed. Its once sleek, predatory form now flickered between the uncoordinated bursts of an ambush predator and the raw, unbridled force of nature defied by collective strength, as each bear used its massive paws to batter and its crushing jaws to drive the creature back. The fields of snow were stained with a mixture of dark blood and the brilliant white of broken ice. The cacophony grew as the Wendigo, caught in the tightening circle of bear unity, emitted a series of unearthly shrieks, a sound somewhere between a lament and a plea. Carried on the fierce, Arctic wind, amid the tumultuous exchange, the faces of the gathering bears seemed to transform. The innate hostility that might have driven them apart was supplanted by a rare, instinctive cooperation, a fleeting, yet potent, act of solidarity in the face of an eldritch menace. The air was charged with an energy both primal and almost mystical as the polar bears, embodying the ancient spirit of their kind, unleashed the full measure of their immense physical power. In one particularly fierce moment, a massive adult bear clamped its jaws around the Wendigo's arm like appendage, its bite echoing with the power of centuries, while another slammed its paw down as if to crush the cursed entity's skeletal form. The creature retaliated with a swipe and a burst of spectral energy that sent shivers through the surrounding ice, its eyes igniting with the infernal glow of the lost souls it had absorbed. Yet the unity of the bear pack proved a force to be reckoned with. Their combined might began to drive back the Wendigo, forcing it to break away from the communal defense for brief, desperate moments, each time it attempted to vanish into the dark fringes of the forest. The adults pounced in unison, their unified roars and savage charges creating a near impenetrable wall of frost and fury. In that relentless, brutal struggle, the ambiguous line between hunter and prey blurred into one grand, primal contest, a battle where nature itself roared its ancient approval of unity over division. The scene, under the clear, unyielding light of the late summer sky, was at once breathtaking and terrible. The pure, icy blue of the wilderness, the stark white of freshly fallen snow stained with the chaos of combat, and the sudden eruptions of red and black, the markings of blood and shadow, formed a tableau of savage beauty and unspoken warning. Every thunderous roar, every savage swipe, and every cry echoing across the barren ice bore witness to the enduring truth that nature, even when torn by internal rivalries and external evils, could summon moments of unity that transcended its inherent conflicts. As the battle raged on with fervor and lingering uncertainty, the indigenous onlookers who had long revered the sacred ways watched in awe and mounting dread. Their eyes, reflective of old legends and cautious knowledge, filled with both pride and sorrow as they witnessed the rare spectacle, polar bears, symbols of pure, Untamed nature, united in a singular cause, repelling a dark force born of unchecked malice. Yet even as the unity of the pack seemed to turn the tide, there lay an unspoken, grim question in every heart. Would the Wendigo, even if forced back, be vanquished entirely? Or would it retreat only to rise once more when the hearts of men and the greed of industry again corrupted the delicate balance of the wild? In that moment of frozen confrontation, amidst the raw and relentless clash between light and shadow, the fate of the gathered polar bears hung in the balance. Their unity, unprecedented and fleeting, was both a triumph of nature's enduring spirit and a fragile bulwark against a force that promised never-ending hunger. The grim spectacle continued under a sky that offered no mercy, a bright, unyielding dome that bore witness to the eternal struggle of life, death, and the unending cycle of renewal and decay. Under the unrelenting blaze of the late summer sun, the battle on the frozen plain entered its final, tumultuous phase. The Wendigo, now wounded and battered from the relentless assault of a united bear pack, staggered on the cracked surface of ice that shuddered beneath each thunderous footfall. Its ragged, spectral form, once a sinuous menace rising from the dark recesses of the forest, wavered uncertainly against the overwhelming force of nature's guardians. The polar bears, their roars now a coordinated symphony of raw power and ancestral defiance, pressed in from every side. Their massive paws beat the air in unison. Each unified charge was as if the very soul of the Arctic were coming alive to vanquish the long-forgotten evil. In one pulse-pounding moment, an immense bear, scarred yet unbowed from countless winters of survival, seized upon a critical opening. With jaws that could shatter ice, it sank its teeth deep into the Wendigo's side, a blow that resonated like the toll of an ancient war drum. The creature's eerie red eyes flashed with the bitter sting of betrayal as its borrowed strength fractured under the unyielding bite. Around them, the ice splintered into a dazzling cascade of shards, each fragment reflecting the fierce glint of the warrior bears and the desperate, maddened fury of a creature now fighting for its very existence. The battlefield became a maelstrom of light and sound. The clarion roars of the polar bears merged with a cacophony of unearthly shrieks from the Wendigo as it fought, flailing wildly in a desperate bid to reclaim its lost might. Each savage swipe of claw and thrust of powerful head sent shockwaves rippling across the snow, while the bears' coordinated advances gradually overwhelmed the dark hybrid. The Wendigo's once supple, cat-like grace became erratic and disjointed under the unyielding barrage of united strikes. It was as though the spirit of the ancient curse, forged in the fires of human greed and despair, was finally succumbing to the relentless, primal force of nature's retribution. As the struggle reached its zenith, the polar bears closed their encirclement with relentless determination. Amid the chaotic interplay of shattered ice and splintered roars, the indigenous onlookers, wary descendants of ancient peoples who had long revered the balance of nature, watched from afar with a mix of awe and sorrow. Their hearts pounded in unison with the rhythm of the battle, each moment etched into the collective memory as both a triumph and a tragic cautionary tale. They knew that in the lore of their ancestors, victory over such a curse did not mean the end of darkness. It only meant that the evil was repelled, for now, by the strength and unity of those who shared a sacred bond with the land. In a final, earth-shattering clash, the massive bear's indomitable charge forced the Wendigo to falter. Its guttural roar, once echoing defiantly across the plains, became a mournful, broken cry. The creature's form, marked by the stolen might of a fallen guardian, began to give way as a violent tremor spread through the ice beneath its weight. In one monumental, irreversible moment, the fragile surface fractured as if unwilling to support such abominations any longer. With a resounding crack that seemed to reverberate through time and space, the Wendigo, and all that dark power it embodied, was hurled into the churning depths of a hidden, icy fissure that opened at the edge of the battlefield. For long, a profound silence descended upon the shattered icefield. The polar bears, their breaths heavy and hearts imbued with the solemn gravity of the victory, slowly regrouped around the breach. The forest and sky, both witness to the age-old struggle, took on a serene, almost sacred quality as nature reclaimed its balance. The indigenous onlookers murmured in soft, respectful tones, their voices carrying a dual message of relief and eternal caution. For as long as humankind harbored the insidious seeds of greed and cruelty, ancient curses like the Wendigo could resurge, biding their time in the hidden crevices of the world. In the fading glow of the dwindling confrontation, the polar bear pack gathered once more around the remnants of their fallen foe. The wounded but unyielding bears resumed their shared feast, a grim testament to both loss and the resilience of life. Even in the face of unfathomable darkness, their unified roars, now tempered with a quiet triumph, spoke a timeless truth, that nature, when it unites against a common threat, can restore its sacred order. And as they ventured slowly away, returning to the familiar realms of their ancestral domain, every thunderous step was a solemn pledge that the eternal vigil over the wild would continue. High above, the clear sky stretched without end, a brilliant dome of blue that seemed to promise renewal and resilience. Yet beneath that light, the lessons of the day remained etched into the memory of the land and its people. The indigenous elders, their voices carrying the weight of generations of wisdom, would later echo the dire warning that the darkness of the Wendigo may have been driven away by the unified strength of the polar bear pack. But it was never truly destroyed, only forced into a temporary exile within the recesses of icy depths, waiting for the moment when greed and exploitation might stir it anew. Thus, as the sun soared high, dispelling the lingering shadows with its indifferent, radiant light, a bittersweet calm settled over the battlefield. The legacy of the day, a struggle defined by raw power, unity, and a haunting reminder of nature's eternal duality, would be remembered as a cornerstone of the indigenous people's lore. It would serve as a stark, unyielding reminder that in the eternal battle between darkness and light, every victory comes at a cost, and every curse, no matter how deeply repelled, waits patiently in the shadows for the next chance to rise.